She doesn't chase power, attention, or approval. While others compete to dominate, the Sigma female quietly evolves beyond the game entirely. Most people misunderstand strength. They think it has to be visible, loud, assertive. They believe power shows itself through control, controlling conversations, controlling outcomes, controlling people. But the Sigma female learned something early, often through disappointment, observation, and deep self-reflection. The strongest position is not on top of others, but beyond them. She doesn't dominate because she doesn't need to. Domination is a language of insecurity. It's used by those who still need confirmation that they matter. The Sigma female already knows she does, that knowing changes everything about how she moves through the world. When she walks into a room, she isn't scanning for competition. She's sensing alignment. She's not wondering how to assert herself. She's deciding whether the environment is even worth her energy. This is why people often feel unsettled around her. They expect the usual cues: posturing, over-explaining, emotional displays, but she offers none of that. Her calm isn't passivity, it's self-mastery. She once tried to explain herself. She once tried to prove her worth. She once tried to win arguments, fix misunderstandings, and make people see her intentions. But growth taught her a quiet truth. People don't misunderstand you by accident, so she stopped dominating conversations. She stopped correcting perceptions. She stopped shrinking or expanding herself for the comfort of others, not because she became cold, but because she became clear. The Sigma female doesn't raise her voice to be heard. She doesn't force presence. Her presence is felt because it's grounded. Because she is fully anchored in herself. She knows what she tolerates. She knows what she doesn't. And more importantly, she acts accordingly without announcing it. They mistake her distance for arrogance, her silence for judgment, her independence for detachment, but none of that is true. What they're witnessing is someone who has outgrown the need to react. The Sigma female once reacted. She once cared deeply about fairness, about being understood, about being valued correctly, but reactions drain power. And over time, she realized that every emotional tug-of-war was costing her more than it was teaching anyone else. Not dramatically, not loudly. She didn't burn bridges or make grand exits. She simply loosened her grip on things that demanded too much and returned too little. She stopped dominating situations because she stopped needing outcomes. That's the difference. Dominance seeks control over others. Growth seeks control over self, and the Sigma female chose growth. She outgrows environments before they realize it. One day she's present, engaged, contributing. The next, she's distant not emotionally, but energetically. She's still polite, still respectful, still composed, but no longer invested. And that shift is unsettling to those who rely on predictable access to her. People are comfortable when they think they know you. The Sigma female becomes unfamiliar even to those who once felt entitled to her time, her emotional labor, her loyalty. She doesn't announce her evolution. She doesn't justify it. She lets her boundaries speak through her availability or lack of it. This is why she's often labeled intimidating, not because she dominates, but because she's no longer easily influenced. She listens more than she speaks. She observes patterns instead of words. She notices inconsistencies, energy shifts, unspoken intentions. And once she sees clearly, she doesn't argue with reality. She adapts. Outgrowing doesn't always look like success. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal, like choosing solitude over stimulation, like choosing peace over being right, like choosing self-respect over connection. The Sigma female understands that not every battle deserves her intelligence, and not every relationship deserves her vulnerability. She doesn't try to change people. That phase passed. She knows transformation is self-directed. Trying to dominate someone into growth is futile. So instead of pushing, she releases. Instead of convincing, she detaches. Instead of demanding, she becomes unavailable. And here's the part most people miss. Her withdrawal isn't punishment, it's alignment. She aligns with herself first. That means she can sit alone without feeling lonely. She can walk away without needing closure. She can let people misjudge her without correcting the narrative, because her identity is no longer externally negotiated. This didn't happen overnight. It took disappointment, betrayal, moments where she gave too much and received too little. Situations where she realized she was expected to carry emotional weight that wasn't hers. She learned where dominance was expected of her, where she was subtly pushed to manage, lead, fix, or hold things together. And she declined, not aggressively, not defensively, simply by opting out. The Sigma female doesn't dominate because domination keeps you entangled. It ties your energy to resistance, to opposition, to constant engagement. She prefers freedom over friction. That's why her power feels different. It's quiet, non-reactive, observant, unavailable to manipulation. She doesn't need to win arguments because she's not trying to prove intelligence. She doesn't need to control outcomes because she trusts her ability to adapt. She doesn't need to dominate people because she's already dominant over her impulses. That level of self-command is rare, and rare things aren't loud. As she outgrows old versions of herself, she sheds behaviors that once felt necessary. Over-explaining, over-giving, over-functioning. She realizes those weren't signs of kindness, they were signs of misplaced responsibility. So she simplifies. Her words become fewer but more intentional. Her circle becomes smaller but more aligned. Her standards become non-negotiable, but she doesn't announce them. She enforces them. Through action. If something disrespects her peace, she doesn't fight it. She removes herself from it. If someone tries to provoke her, she doesn't react. She observes the attempt, notes the pattern, and adjusts access. This is where her evolution becomes obvious to those paying attention. She's no longer available for chaos. She's no longer interested in power struggles. She's no longer invested in dynamics that require her to be less than whole, and that's when people realize they can't dominate her either, because domination only works on those still seeking validation. The Sigma female isn't seeking, she's selecting. She selects where her time goes, where her emotions are spent, where her loyalty is placed, and she does it quietly, without asking permission. This can feel threatening to those who rely on control to feel secure. They sense her detachment and interpret it as rejection, but it's not rejection, it's redirection. She's redirecting her life toward depth instead of drama, toward substance instead of status, toward growth instead of approval. She understands that not everyone is meant to come with her. Some people are chapters, not destinations, and clinging to chapters prevents the story from evolving. So she turns the page, not with bitterness, not with resentment, but with acceptance. The Sigma female doesn't dominate because she doesn't need to hold anyone down. To rise, she rises by letting go, and once she's outgrown a space, a dynamic, or a version of herself, there is no going back. She doesn't announce her departure, she simply becomes unreachable. Once she becomes unreachable, something subtle but powerful happens around her. People begin to feel the absence of access before they consciously recognize the reason. Conversations feel flatter without her insight. Dynamics lose balance without her emotional regulation. Situations that once relied on her calm now feel exposed. That's because the Sigma female was never dominating, she was stabilizing. And when she outgrows a space, the space reveals itself. She used to be the one who held composure when others spiraled, the one who listened when no one else would, the one who stayed rational in emotional storms, not because it was her duty, but because she was capable. Over time, she noticed something unsettling. Her strength had become a convenience for others, so she reclaimed it. Outgrowing is not an escape, it's a decision to stop being a resource for dysfunction. The Sigma female understands that dominance is often a reaction to feeling powerless. People dominate to compensate, they interrupt to feel heard, they control to feel safe, they overpower to avoid vulnerability. She doesn't judge this, she simply refuses to participate in it. She learned that every environment has an unspoken economy. Attention is currency, emotional labor is currency, availability is currency, and, for a long time, she was paying into systems that never intended to reciprocate. So she withdrew her investment, not abruptly, gradually, thoughtfully, with awareness. She began noticing how people reacted when she stopped overgiving. Some became distant, some became irritated, some tried to provoke a reaction, to pull her back into the familiar role. That's when she realized something crucial. Access to her had been mistaken for entitlement, and she corrected that misunderstanding without confrontation. The Sigma female doesn't announce boundaries, she embodies them. She answers less, explains less, engages selectively. She doesn't need to justify her choices because her self-trust no longer requires witnesses. This can feel confusing to those who were used to constant access to her inner world. But she's not hiding, she's conserving. She knows her depth isn't meant for everyone. As she evolves, she stops mistaking intensity for connection. She recognizes that loud emotions don't equal sincerity, that constant communication doesn't equal intimacy, that familiarity doesn't equal loyalty. She becomes discerning. This discernment is often mistaken for coldness, but it's precision. She chooses where to place her emotional intelligence. She chooses who gets to hear her thoughts. She chooses when silence is more powerful than response, and silence becomes one of her greatest tools, not silent treatment, not avoidance, but intentional quiet. She lets people reveal themselves in the absence of her reactions. She watches how they behave when she's no longer managing the emotional temperature. She observes who respects her space and who resents it. Information comes easily when you stop interfering. The Sigma female doesn't dominate because she understands something most people never fully grasp. Control creates resistance, but freedom reveals truth. So she gives people freedom, freedom to act without her guidance, freedom to speak without her correction, freedom to behave without her moderation, and in that freedom, patterns become undeniable. This is how she outgrows relationships, not through conflict but through clarity. She no longer tries to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding her. She doesn't argue with projections. She doesn't chase alignment. She lets misalignment stand on its own. Her emotional discipline becomes visible in moments of tension. Where others react, she pauses. Where others escalate, she disengages. Where others demand answers, she offers none, not out of defiance but out of self-respect. She knows that explanations are wasted on those who don't listen to understand. The Sigma female has learned that the need to dominate often comes from fear of being irrelevant. She has faced that fear and moved beyond it. She knows her worth doesn't diminish when she's not central to every interaction, so she decentralizes herself. She doesn't need to be the focus. She doesn't need to be chosen. She doesn't need to be pursued. Those needs belong to an earlier version of her aversion, still learning where validation truly comes from. Now, validation is internal. This internal grounding changes how she handles conflict. She doesn't confront impulsively. She doesn't react emotionally. She evaluates whether engagement is even necessary. Many times it isn't. Not every issue deserves a conversation. Not every disrespect deserves acknowledgement. Some things are best addressed with distance. She understands that withdrawal is sometimes the most honest response. Not everything can be fixed through communication. Some things reveal themselves only when you stop trying to fix them. So she steps back and lets reality speak. This is why her absence often feels louder than her presence ever did. People begin to replay conversations, to question interactions, to wonder what changed. But the truth is, nothing changed in her. What changed was her tolerance. She outgrew excuses. She outgrew emotional inconsistency. She outgrew being the stable one in unstable dynamics, and she didn't replace those things with dominance. She replaced them with boundaries. Boundaries that don't argue. Boundaries that don't threaten. Boundaries that simply exist. She doesn't need to explain why she's less available. Her life doesn't require public reasoning. She doesn't owe updates on her evolution. Those who are meant to understand will adjust. Those who aren't will resist. Resistance confirms misalignment. The Sigma female doesn't chase harmony at the expense of herself. She understands that peace sometimes requires discomfort for others. So she allows discomfort. She allows people to feel confused. She allows them to feel excluded. She allows them to sit with the consequences of her absence. Not as punishment, but as reality. Her growth didn't make her heartless. It made her honest. Honest about her capacity. Honest about her limits. Honest about what drains her and what sustains her. She no longer romanticizes struggle. She no longer glorifies endurance. She understands that staying too long in misaligned spaces is not loyalty, it's self-betrayal. So she leaves without spectacle. No speeches, no ultimatums, no dramatic exits, just a gradual reclaiming of self. She invests in solitude not as isolation, but as recalibration. Time alone sharpens her intuition. Distance refines her perspective. Stillness strengthens her discernment. She becomes comfortable with being misunderstood because she understands something deeper. Clarity is more important than consensus. Not everyone needs to agree with her choices. Not everyone needs to like her evolution. Not everyone is meant to have access to her next chapter. The Sigma female doesn't dominate because domination 'tis you to the very thing you trying to control. She chooses detachment instead. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means she no longer attaches her self-worth to outcomes she can't control. She releases the illusion of influence over others, and in doing so, she gains influence over herself. That's where her real power resides. Her presence becomes intentional, her energy becomes protected, her standards become lived, not spoken. She understands that growth often looks like becoming less available to what once defined you. So she lets go of roles she never agreed to but somehow inherited: the fixer, the mediator, the emotional anchor, the understanding one. She hands those roles back. And in that space, something remarkable happens. She expands, not outwardly, inwardly. Her thoughts become clearer, her emotions become steadier, her intuition becomes louder. She trusts herself more because she's no longer constantly overriding her inner signals to accommodate others. She learns that dominance is external, evolution is internal, and internal shifts don't need announcements. They show themselves in behavior, in choices, in absence, in the calm certainty with which she moves forward without looking back. As she moves forward without looking back, the Sigma female enters a phase few people ever witness. Directly, it's not glamorous, it's not performative, it's quiet reconstruction. This is where she no longer reacts to the world as it is, but shapes her life around what sustains her. She becomes deeply intentional. Her days are no longer filled with unnecessary noise. She curates what enters her mind, her space, her emotional field. Conversations become purposeful. Silence becomes restorative. She understands that energy is finite, and she treats it with respect. This is where the difference between domination and evolution becomes unmistakable. Domination demands attention. Evolution commands none. She doesn't need to be seen to be certain of her direction. She doesn't need applause to validate her progress. Her sense of movement comes from alignment, not comparison. She measures her growth by how little she needs external affirmation. The Sigma female develops a different relationship with power. She no longer associates it with control, influence, or authority over others. Power, too. Her is choice, the ability to say no without guilt, the ability to leave without explaining, the ability to stay grounded regardless of how others behave. She understands that emotional independence is the highest form of freedom, that freedom changes how she loves, how she works, how she exists in the world. She no longer bonds through chaos, she bonds through stability. She doesn't confuse intensity with intimacy. She notices how someone treats her boundaries, not how strongly they express interest. Consistency becomes more attractive than passion. Integrity becomes more magnetic than charm. This shift is subtle but irreversible. She outgrows dynamics built on emotional highs and lows. She's no longer interested in proving loyalty through endurance. She recognizes that peace is not boring, it's rare, and she protects it fiercely. Her relationships become fewer but deeper. She doesn't chase connection. She allows it to emerge naturally, if it requires effort. That feels like self-abandonment. She lets it go. This is where many people lose access to her, not because she became unreachable, but because they never learned how to meet her where she is. She doesn't lower herself to be understood. She doesn't simplify her depth for convenience. She doesn't perform relatability. She exists as she is, trusting that alignment doesn't require explanation. Her solitude becomes sacred. She uses it to think, to observe, to refine. She reflects without self-judgment. She reviews her past not with regret but with understanding. She sees patterns clearly now: the moments she ignored intuition, the times she stayed too long, the energy she gave away without return. She doesn't punish herself for those moments. She integrates them. Every experience becomes data. Every disappointment becomes instruction. Every loss becomes a narrowing of focus. This is how she evolves without hardening. Her heart remains open, but her access is guarded. She can be warm without being available, kind without being accommodating, compassionate without being involved. This balance is what makes her presence so distinct. People often sense something different about her but can't name it. It's not confidence in the traditional sense, it's self-containment. She doesn't leak energy through overreaction. She doesn't seek reassurance through repetition. She doesn't need to dominate conversations to feel included. She's fully present without being performative. This presence changes how others interact with her. Some rise to meet her level of clarity. Others fade away. She doesn't chase either outcome. She allows things to sort themselves naturally. She understands that forcing alignment creates resistance, allowing space creates truth, so she allows. She allows silence, she allows distance, she allows endings without closure. This doesn't make her detached from life, it makes her deeply connected to herself. She trusts her internal compass more than external opinions. When faced with decisions, she doesn't poll the room, she listens inward. She's learned that the voice she once doubted was always accurate, it just needed her attention. As she continues to outgrow old patterns, she becomes less interested in labels. Sigma, alpha, any category meant to explain her no longer feels relevant. She doesn't need an identity to perform. She simply exists in her authenticity, and authenticity doesn't dominate, it stands. She stands in her values without defending them. She stands in her choices without justifying them. She stands in her solitude without fearing it. This stability becomes her signature. She's no longer pulled by trends, opinions, or emotional pressure. She understands that most people are reacting, not choosing. She chooses deliberately. That deliberateness affects how she handles uncertainty. When things are unclear, she doesn't rush to resolve them. She allows ambiguity. She knows clarity comes with time and observation. She doesn't force answers prematurely. This patience is often mistaken for indifference, but it's trust, trust in process, trust in self. Trust that what aligns will remain, and what doesn't will fall away without effort. She no longer fears being left behind because she knows she's moving toward herself. She's not competing. She's not comparing. She's not proving anything. She's becoming, and becoming is a solitary process. The Sigma female understands that growth requires space from noise, from expectation, from constant engagement. She creates that space intentionally. She doesn't wait for permission to evolve. She designs her life around sustainability, not validation. Her routines support her mental clarity. Her boundaries protect her emotional well-being. Her goals reflect her values, not societal pressure. She's no longer interested in being impressive. She's interested in being whole. This wholeness changes how she responds to others. Attempts at control, manipulation doesn't work on her because she's not attached to outcomes. Guilt doesn't work because she's processed her sense of responsibility. Provocation doesn't work because she doesn't need to react to feel powerful. She recognizes these attempts not with anger, but with detachment, and detachment is disarming. People can't dominate someone who doesn't need their approval, reaction, or validation. This is why her energy feels untouchable. She doesn't fight for autonomy. She lives it. She doesn't argue for respect. She embodies it. She doesn't dominate environments. She chooses whether to remain in them. And if an environment no longer supports her growth, she leaves without resentment. She understands that outgrowing is not betrayal, it's evolution. She no longer feels the need to announce her boundaries because they are evident in her behavior. She no longer fears being misunderstood because she understands herself. This self-understanding is her anchor. When life challenges her, she responds with adaptability, not control. She adjusts without panic. She pivots without drama. She trusts her capacity to handle what comes. She's not rigid, she's resilient. And resilience doesn't dominate. It endures, adapts, and transforms. The Sigma female becomes someone whose life feels intentional rather than reactive. She doesn't seek to be ahead of others. She seeks to be aligned with herself. That alignment is what makes her powerful, not loud power, not visible power, but quiet, unshakable authority over her own life. She doesn't dominate, she outgrows. And in doing so, she becomes someone no one can control because she no longer needs to control anything at all.